My name is Father Cyprian Toretti, and by the time you read this, I'll either be dead or wishing I was. 3 weeks ago, I was just another archivist in the Vatican Secret Archives, or as they renamed it in 2019, the Apostolic Archive. 28 years old, ordained only 4 years ago in Brescia, selected for my doctorate in ancient Semitic languages. Cardinal Monteverde himself had recommended me for the position, calling my work on pre-Masoretic Hebrew texts revolutionary. If only he knew what his recommendation would lead to. The archive sprawls beneath Vatican City like a stone labyrinth. 53 miles of shelving, they tell tourists. What they don't mention are the sub-basements that don't appear on any map, the sections requiring papal authority to enter, or the documents that 3 different popes have died trying to destroy. I discovered the Codex Vetitum purely by accident. I was cataloging a collection of Coptic manuscripts when I noticed an inconsistency in the shelf numbering. Section C14 jumped from 347 to 349. The space where 348 should have been was sealed behind a newer brick wall, painted to match the ancient stone. The paint was still tacky in places. Someone had renewed it recently. Father Benedetti, my supervisor, was in Assisi that week. The security guard, Giulio, was absorbed in the football match on his phone. Using a letter opener and 40 minutes of careful work, I loosened a single brick. Behind it was a metal box, no larger than a shoebox, marked with a wax seal I didn't recognize. A reverse pentagram surrounded by Hebrew letters that hurt to read. Inside was a single volume, bound in leather that felt uncomfortably warm. The cover bore no title, only a date in Roman numerals, 616. The year 616. But that wasn't what made my hand shake. It was the note tucked inside the front cover, written in Latin in what looked like fresh ink. Whoever finds this, know that Pope Honorius I ordered it destroyed in 638. Pope Urban VIII tried again in 1623. Pope Pius XII attempted to burn it in 1944. Each time, it returns. We have given up trying to destroy it. We can only hide it. Do not read beyond the 7th seal. Cardinal A. Villot, February 1979. I should have replaced the brick. I should have reported it to Monteverde immediately. Instead, I tucked the volume under my cassock and walked out past Giulio, my heart hammering against the strange warmth of the leather. That night, in my small apartment near Borgo Pio, I opened what I would later learn the previous archivist called the Codex Vetitum, the Forbidden Book. What I found inside wasn't just heretical or blasphemous. It was true. And the truth, I learned, is sometimes the most terrible thing of all. The Codex opened to reveal text in Aramaic. Not the classical Aramaic I knew from seminary, but something older, rougher. The letters seemed to writhe on the vellum pages, resisting translation. I had to focus on each word individually, like trying to read through water. The first page began. In the 33rd year after the crucifixion, I, Thaddeus of Edessa, write with the 12, would not. My coffee grew cold as I worked through that first passage. Thaddeus claimed to be recording testimonies from those who witnessed Christ's ministry. But these weren't the miracles from the canonical Gospels. These were the events that happened between the miracles and the dark spaces where the evangelists fell silent. The second testimony made me close the book and pour myself wine instead of coffee. It was from a woman named Mara, who claimed to have been present at Lazarus's raising. But her account differed drastically from John's Gospel. The Nazarene stood before the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights, neither eating nor drinking. We heard him speaking in tongues no human throat should form. When Lazarus emerged, his eyes were not his own. They reflected too much light, like pools of mercury. He spoke of a vast darkness where no prayers reached, where something ancient had noticed him and followed him back. I rubbed my eyes. Seminary had taught me to recognize Gnostic fabrications, apocalyptic fiction designed to discredit the early church. But the Aramaic was too precise, too contemporary to the period. The vocabulary, the syntax. Whoever wrote this had lived in first century Palestine. My apartment suddenly felt smaller. The radiator clanked, though it was late September and still warm. I noticed my hands had left damp prints on the vellum. The leather binding remained unsettlingly warm, like skin with fever. The third testimony was shorter, from a Roman soldier named Quintus. After the crucifixion, we were ordered to guard the tomb. On the second night, we heard scratching from within, not against the stone, but against the earth beneath. Marcus looked through a crack in the seal. He never spoke again, only drew symbols in the dirt, until Pilate had him crucified for madness. I stood up, paced my small room. These couldn't be authentic. The church had preserved everything from that period, every scrap of papyrus, every carved stone. How could something this significant remain hidden? But then I remembered Cardinal Villot's note. 3 popes had tried to destroy it. Each time, it returned. The fourth testimony began. I am Simon, called Peter, and I confess what I have hidden even from my brothers. My phone rang. Cardinal Monteverde's name appeared on the screen. It was past midnight. Cyprian. His voice was strained. The brick you removed from C14 triggered a silent alarm. We know you have it. The leather binding grew hot enough to burn. Your Eminence, I stammered, the phone slick in my palm. I can explain. No explanation, Cyprian. Only choices. Monteverde's breathing was labored, as if he'd been running. You have perhaps 10 minutes before the Swiss guard arrives. Listen carefully. That book you're holding, it's not what you think it is. These testimonies, I said, they contradict everything. They contradict nothing. They complete everything. A pause, then sounds of movement. Cyprian. I was the one who loosened that brick. The room tilted. I gripped the desk for support. What? 23 years ago, I was you. Young, brilliant, foolish. I found the codex in a different place, inside a statue of Saint Helena that wept blood every Easter. I read it. All of it. Past the 7th seal that Cardinal Villot warned about. Through my window, I saw black sedans pulling up to my building. No sirens, no lights. What happens after the 7th seal? The testimonies change. They become instructions. Cyprian, there's a reason Christ's ministry lasted only 3 years. A reason he had to die when he did. The thing that came back with Lazarus, it was growing stronger each time he performed a resurrection. Each time he brought someone back. My doorbell rang, then urgent knocking. Don't answer that, Monteverde said quickly. Go to your bathroom. Behind the mirror, you'll find a package I had Father Benedetti hide there months ago, when I first suspected you might be the one. The one for what? To finish what needs finishing. The codex can't be destroyed because it's not completely here. Part of it exists. Elsewhere. Every pope who tried to burn it only destroyed the physical pages. Within days, they reformed, pulled back from wherever the rest of it waits. The knocking became pounding. German-accented Italian shouted through the door. I ran to the bathroom, phone pressed to my ear, the codex burning against my ribs where I tucked it. The mirror came away easily. Someone had already loosened the screws. Behind it was an envelope containing a Vatican diplomatic passport with my photo, but the name Father Marcus Antonelli. €1,000 in cash and a car key. There's more, Monteverde continued. The final testimony in the Codex, after the seals. It's not from the past. It's dated 6 days from now. That's impossible. I caught myself using that banned word and stopped. Nothing is impossible once you understand what the Codex really is. It's not a historical document. It's a living text, still being written. Every person who reads it adds to it. Their testimony becomes part of it. The pounding stopped. I heard the whir of power tools against my door lock. Where do I go? I whispered. Jerusalem. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There's a wall in the Armenian chapel that shouldn't exist. It was built in 1953 to seal something. Sister Agatha Voss oversees that section. Tell her I sent you. Tell her the fisherman's confession has been read. Cardinal, what happened to you after you read past the 7th seal? Silence, then. I spent 6 years in the Magdalene Asylum outside Rome. They called it a nervous breakdown, but I knew what I'd seen. The testimonies after the seals, the not from apostles, the from the others, the ones who came back wrong. And Cyprian, the door splintered. I wasn't the only one who read it completely. Pope Benedict's resignation? He'd found the copy in the papal apartments. The real reason was never made public. 3 Swiss guards entered, their modern tactical gear contrasting with the ceremonial uniforms tourists knew. Their leader, a sergeant with gray eyes, held out his hand. The book, Father Toretti. Run, Monteverde said through the phone. The red Vespa in the alley. Run now. I threw the phone at the sergeant's face and dove through my kitchen window onto the fire escape. The Codex seemed to pulse against my chest as I clattered down the rusted stairs. Behind me, boots thundered. The alley reeked of garbage and cat urine. The Vespa was there, kicked to life on the first try. As I roared onto the empty street, I caught a glimpse of the sergeant in my mirror. He wasn't pursuing. He was standing still, speaking into a radio. They wanted me to run, I realized. But why? The Codex grew hotter, and I swore I felt new words writing themselves across its pages. The flight to Tel Aviv took 4 hours. I ditched the Vespa at Fiumicino Airport and used the diplomatic passport without issue. Throughout the flight, the Codex remained pressed against my skin beneath my civilian clothes, a constant fever I couldn't shake. In the airplane bathroom, I risked examining it again. New text had appeared, written in modern Italian. I am Cyprian Toretti, and I flee Rome with stolen truth. The guard does not pursue because they know where I'm going. They've always known. This is not escape. This is pilgrimage. I hadn't written those words. My hands shook as I watched more letters form. In 3 hours, I will meet Sister Agatha. She has been dead for 6 months. I shoved the book back under my shirt and returned to my seat. The elderly woman beside me, wearing a Star of David, smiled kindly. First time in the Holy Land? She asked in accented English. Yes, I lied. You look troubled, young man. Perhaps you'll find what you're looking for there. Everyone does, though it's rarely what they expected. Jerusalem's old city assaulted my senses. Cardamom and diesel fumes, church bells competing with the call to prayer, tourists photographing every stone. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre squatted like a wounded giant, scaffolding covering parts of its ancient facade. The Armenian chapel was nearly empty. A single nun knelt in prayer, her habit the deep brown of the Carmelites. When she turned, I stumbled backward. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken, skin with the waxy pallor I'd seen on corpses during last rites. "Father Toretti," she said, her voice dry leaves scraping stone. "Cardinal Monteverde told me to expect you, though told isn't quite accurate. He prayed, and I heard." "Sister Agatha Voss?" I was. She stood, movements too fluid as if her joints bent in extra places. "I've been waiting here since February, when my body was buried in Munich. The Codex calls us back, those who read too far. We become its witnesses." She led me behind the altar to a section of wall covered by a tapestry depicting the resurrection. Behind it, modern concrete blocked what had once been a doorway. Someone had scratched symbols into the concrete, the same Hebrew letters from the Codex's seal. "This wall," Sister Agatha said, "seals the original tomb. Not where they tell tourists Christ was buried, the real one. The one Joseph of Arimathea wished he'd never offered. Why seal it? Because things still come through. Every Easter we hear them scratching. Sometimes they speak, testimonies that want to be added to the Codex. The wall keeps them out. Mostly." She produced a sledgehammer from behind a prayer bench. "Cardinal Monteverde says you've read Peter's confession." I nodded, remembering that testimony. "I am Simon, called Peter, and I confess what I have hidden even from my brothers." On the third day, when we found the tomb empty, it was not empty. Something else was there, wearing his face, but speaking with the voice of the depths. I knew it was not wholly him, but the others needed to believe, so I let them. God forgive me. I let them believe. "Then you know," Sister Agatha said, hefting the hammer, "why this wall must come down." "I don't understand." "The Codex isn't complete. The final testimonies are trapped behind this wall, carved into the tombstones by those who came back. Once the Codex is complete, it can finally be destroyed. All of it, including the parts that exist beyond our reality." She swung the hammer. Concrete cracked, revealing darkness that seemed to breathe. "Help me," she commanded. As I grabbed a chunk of broken concrete, the Codex burned hotter. New words were writing themselves. I could feel them. "I am Cyprian Toretti, and I am opening what should remain closed." Sister Agatha's eyes reflect too much light, like Lazarus, like all who return. Soon, mine will too. We worked in terrible harmony, widening the gap. From within came a smell, myrrh mixed with something organic and wrong. The darkness beyond wasn't empty. Shadows moved independently of our light. "Just a little more," Sister Agatha whispered, and I noticed her reflection in the brass plate showed her facing the wrong direction. The final chunk of concrete fell away. The tomb exhaled centuries of sealed air. Inside, scratched into every surface in languages spanning 2 millennia, with thousands of testimonies, and they were all moving. The testimonies crawled across the stone like living things. Latin merged into Greek, Hebrew bled into languages I couldn't identify. Each time I focused on one inscription, it would shift, revealing different words underneath, layers upon layers of truth. Sister Agatha stepped into the tomb first. Her shadow fell upward, spreading across the ceiling. "Read them," she said. "Read them aloud. That's what frees them." I followed her inside. The tomb was larger than physics should have allowed, extending beyond the chapel's foundation in the space that couldn't exist. My flashlight beam bent at wrong angles, illuminating carvings that hurt perceived directly. The nearest testimony was in medieval French. I am Brother Guillaume, died of plague in 1347. I awoke in my grave and clawed through earth for 7 days. When I emerged, the world had color I'd never seen before. I could taste people's thoughts. Their prayers were screams. God's voice was silence. I walked to Rome to confess, but the Pope had me burned. The flames felt like homecoming. As I read it aloud, the words faded from the stone and appeared in the codex against my chest. The book was drinking the testimonies. Sister Agatha pointed to another section. That one. Read it. Modern English, carved with fingernails. Doctor. Sarah Blackwood, cardiac arrest, May 15th, 2019. Was dead for 12 minutes. Saw no light, no tunnel, only vast mathematics. Equations that prove love was just chemical signals, consciousness merely electrical patterns. Came back knowing we're alone. Completely alone. God is the story we tell ourselves to make the loneliness bearable. My voice cracked as I read it. The words transferred to the codex, and Dr. Blackwood's despair flooded through me. Her memories, her crushing realization, her wish she'd stayed dead. Every person who's ever come back, Sister Agatha explained, leaves their testimony here eventually. Whether they know it or not, part of them remains in this tomb, writing their truth in the stone. I found another older in Koine Greek. I am Lazarus of Bethany. I was dead 4 days. What Christ called back was not all of me. The part that matters, the part that loves and hopes, that stayed in the darkness. I am movement without purpose, breath without life. My sisters weep for what I was. Christ weeps for what he's done. The codex was burning through my shirt now, leaving marks on my skin. Each testimony I read made it heavier, as if the weight of all those ruined resurrections was accumulating. Why are you helping me? I asked Sister Agatha. Because when the codex is complete, when all testimonies are gathered, it can finally judge. Judge what? Whether resurrection is divine miracle or cosmic violation. Whether Christ saved us or broke something fundamental in reality. Her reflection in the polished stone showed her as she truly was. Flesh hanging loose, bones visible through transparent skin. Look at me, Father. Really look. Is this salvation? Near the tomb's far wall, I found the testimony I'd been dreading. Written in Aramaic, ancient but somehow still wet. I am Yeshua of Nazareth. On the 3rd day I returned, but the kingdom of heaven I'd seen was empty. The Father's throne was dust. I found only myself. Infinite versions. Each dying and returning. Dying and returning. I am the resurrection that cannot end. I am the life that becomes curse. Peter knows. He's always known. That's why he denied me thrice. He saw what I'd become. I collapsed to my knees. The codex fell from my shirt, landing open on the stone floor. Its pages were turning by themselves now, filling with testimonies faster than I could read them aloud. The final testimony, Sister Agatha whispered, will be yours. The codex lay open on the tomb floor, its pages now pure white, every previous testimony erased, waiting. Sister Agatha knelt beside it, her fingers hovering above the black vellum. "Your turn," she said. "I haven't died. I can't write a testimony." "Haven't you?" She touched my chest where the codex had burned me. The skin was black, not charred but void black, as if that part of me had been erased. "The moment you read Peter's confession, you started dying. Each testimony you absorbed took something from you. Check your pulse." I pressed fingers to my wrist. Nothing. Then my throat. Silence. "When?" I whispered. "Probably on the plane." Most don't notice. Death isn't the dramatic event we imagine. It's just crossing a threshold you can't see until you're past it. I thought of the elderly woman on the plane, her kind smile. Had she been real? Was any of this? The tomb's walls began to shift, testimonies rearranging themselves into a pattern. Not words anymore, but a map. Jerusalem spread across the stone in carved lines. Every church, every shrine, every sacred site connected by veins of text. "This isn't just about the codex," I said, understanding flooding through me. "The testimonies. The coordinates." Sister Agatha nodded. "Every resurrection point. Every place someone came back wrong. The tomb is the center, but the corruption spreads through all sacred ground. Easter, when Christians worldwide celebrate resurrection, the barrier weakens. Things seep through." "What things?" "The ones who didn't come back at all. Who got lost between death and resurrection. They exist in the gap, neither dead nor alive, watching us through every crucifix, every icon, every stained glass window depicting the risen Christ." She stood, moving toward a section of wall I hadn't noticed before. The stone was different here, newer, roughly mortared. This was sealed in 1967. The Six-Day War wasn't about politics. Israel took Jerusalem because the Vatican asked them to. We needed military control to keep people away from what's behind this wall. Another tomb? No. The ossuary, where they kept the bones of those Christ raised before his own resurrection. The widow's son, Jairus' daughter, and others the Gospels don't mention. 23 in total. The bones sing at night. Testimonies and marrow and calcium. She began pulling at the mortar with her fingernails, which were too long, too sharp. Gray dust felt like ash. "Don't," I said, but my voice carried no conviction. Part of me, the part that was dead but walking, wanted to see. The mortar crumbled. Behind it was a chamber filled with limestone boxes, each carved with warnings in Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. The same phrase repeated. "Let sleeping gods lie." "Gods?" I asked. "What else would you call something that conquers death?" The Romans were right to be terrified. They didn't kill Christ because he threatened their power. They killed him because Pilate's wife had dreams of what he'd become if he kept raising the dead. Each resurrection made him less human, more something else. The crucifixion was mercy, for him and us. One ossuary was cracked. Through the gap I could see bone that gleamed like pearl, too white, too pure. As I watched, the bones assembled themselves into shapes that weren't quite human. Too many joints, vertebrae that spiraled. Sister Agatha pulled the cracked ossuary free. It was lighter than it should have been, as if the bones inside existed only partially in our reality. This was Tabitha, called Dorcas. Peter raised her in Joppa. She lived another 40 years after resurrection, but never ate, never slept, never aged. When she finally died again, her body wouldn't burn. They had to grind her bones to powder and scatter them in the sea. But the powder found its way back here, grain by grain, over centuries. The bones in the box began to hum, a frequency that made my teeth, did I still have teeth, ache. The codex isn't just recording testimonies, Sister Agatha continued. It's a summoning. When complete, when every testimony of failed resurrection is gathered, it calls them all back. Every botched resurrection, every soul caught between states. They'll rise together, and the boundary between life and death dissolves permanently. Why would Monteverde want this? Because he read the final pages, the ones that haven't been written yet. He saw what happens if we don't complete the codex. The resurrections continue randomly, uncontrolled. More people coming back wrong, each one a door for something else to enter our world. By completing the codex, we trigger all resurrections at once, overwhelming the system, breaking the mechanism itself. That would mean no more resurrections. Ever. Death becomes final again. The natural order restored. I looked at my hands. They were translucent at the edges, fading like old photographs. But everyone who's been resurrected goes back. Including me. Including you now. Including... She paused, smiled with too many teeth. Anyone who's received last rites, extreme unction. The sacrament is a miniature resurrection, preparing the soul for return. Every Catholic who's died with last rites has a thread connecting them to this tomb. The weight of it crushed me. Billions of souls throughout history connected to this place by sacred ritual. Write your testimony, Sister Agatha commanded. Complete the codex. End this. I picked up the pen that materialized beside the book. A quill made from bone, ink that smelled of myrrh. I am Cyprian Toretti, I wrote, and I understand now why Judas had to betray Christ. Someone had to stop the resurrections. The 30 pieces of silver weren't payment. There were silver coins placed on dead eyes. Payment for the ferryman. Judas knew. He tried to save us all. The words burned into the page. The tomb shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, but it fell upward. From every ossuary came the sound of stirring bones. The ossuary containing Tabitha's bones split open. What emerged wasn't skeleton, but suggestion. A form made of probability rather than matter, shifting between states of existence. Where her face should have been was a void filled with scripture, words of resurrection, written in languages that predated human speech. She's beautiful, Sister Agatha whispered, reaching toward the thing that had been Tabitha. The fingers touched. Sister Agatha's hand passed through, and where it did, her flesh became text, skin peeling away in strips covered with her own testimony, her death and return inscribed on what had been her body. More ossuaries cracked. The widow's son from Nain arose as sound without source, his testimony a frequency that turned stone to salt. Jairus' daughter materialized as a child-shaped absence, her presence defined by everything she wasn't. My pen moved without my control, the codex writing through me. I am Cyprian Toretti, and I witness the gathering. They come, not as bodies, but as arguments against nature. Each resurrection a mathematical proof that death plus divine intervention equals something neither living nor dead, but exponentially worse. The tomb expanded, walls stretching beyond architecture and a concept. I could see through the stone now, Jerusalem above us, pilgrims shuffling through the church, unaware that reality was thinning beneath their feet. "Look," Sister Agatha said, her jaw unhinging to speak, revealing rows of teeth made from communion wafers. "The faithful. Watch what happens when they pray." Above us, an elderly man kissed a crucifix. Where his lips touched Christ's carved feet, frost spread. Not ice, but crystallized time. Moments frozen and stacked. The man aged decades in seconds, his prayer becoming literal, physical weight that bent space around him. A tour group entered the chapel directly above the tomb. Their guide was explaining the resurrection in 5 languages. With each translation, the words became more true, more real, until the tourists began to glow with belief made manifest. One woman's skin turned to stained glass, her veins led channels filled with light. She didn't notice. None of them did. "Every prayer about resurrection strengthens the break," Sister Agatha explained, though her voice now came from the walls rather than her body. 2,000 years of Easter celebrations, billions of voices declaring, "He is risen." We turned a crack in reality into a canyon. The codex pulled me forward. My hand wrote, "Cardinal Monteverde knew. The Vatican has always known. Why else locate the church's seat directly above Nero's circus, where Peter was crucified upside down?" Peter didn't want to die like Christ, because he knew what resurrection meant. Inverted crucifixion, the opposite of rising, a plea to stay down, stay dead, stay finished. Through the stone, I watched a priest preparing communion in the church above. As he blessed the wine, it turned to actual blood. Not symbolically, not transubstantiation, but genuine human blood that overflowed the chalice. The priest continued the ritual even as blood pooled at his feet, even as his congregation began to change. Each person who'd taken communion that day started to remember death. Not metaphorically. They remembered their own deaths, futures bleeding backward in the present. A child saw herself elderly, machines failing, last breath rattling. A young couple experienced their car accident scheduled for next Tuesday. The priest watched his cancer develop in real time, tumors blooming like flowers beneath his vestments. "The Eucharist," I wrote, compelled by the Codex, "is practice resurrection. Take, eat. This is my body." We've been rehearsing return from death every Sunday for millennia. Now the rehearsal becomes performance. The gathered resurrections in the tomb began to sing, not with voices, but with existence itself. Reality harmonized wrong, notes that shouldn't exist in the same universe forced into chorus. The sound spread through Jerusalem's bedrock, following ley lines of faith. In Rome, I somehow knew the Pope was collapsing. Cardinals were bleeding from their eyes, not blood, but liquefied prayer, decades of devotion pouring out as crimson scripture. The Sistine Chapel's ceiling cracked, and through the crack, Michelangelo's God reached down with too many fingers, each one a different stage of decay. "We have to finish it," Sister Agatha said, her body now entirely text, a woman-shaped story of death and return. "Write the ending, Cyprian." But I couldn't lift the pen. My hand had become parchment, skin transforming into pages of the Codex. I was becoming the book, or it was becoming me. "This isn't Monteverde's plan," I managed to say. He didn't want to break resurrection. He wanted to perfect it. Sister Agatha laughed, a sound like tearing paper. "Perfect. Look around you. This is perfection. The honest truth of what lies beyond death. Not heaven, not hell. Just continuation without meaning. Existence without essence. The mathematical remainder when you divide infinity by 0. The pen moved again, writing my final testimony. I am Cyprian Toretti, and I understand now. The Codex doesn't end resurrection. It reveals what resurrection always was. The pen completed my sentence against my will. A divine malfunction. A glitch in the software of existence that God couldn't patch. Thunder without sound shook the tomb. The resurrected began to merge, individual testimonies blending into one enormous truth that threatened to tear cognition apart. Through the widening cracks in reality, I saw Cardinal Monteverde. He stood in the Vatican archives surrounded by the Swiss Guard, but they were wrong now. Their faces replaced by pages from prayer books, bodies moving like marionettes guided by liturgy rather than muscle. Monteverde held another codex, identical to mine. There were always two, he said, his voice arriving before his words, causality inverted. One to record the testimonies of the failed resurrections. One to record the testimony of the only successful one. Successful? My voice came from the codex now, written rather than spoken. Mary, the Virgin Mother. She who died and returned without corruption. The assumption wasn't her rising to heaven. It was heaven coming down to retrieve what had escaped. She broke the pattern, Cyprian. Died, returned, and remained human. The second codex in his hands opened, revealing text in a language that predated Babel, words humanity had spoken before we divided in the tribes. I could read it perfectly. I am Miriam, mother of Yeshua, and I alone returned whole. Not because I was pure, but because I refused resurrection. When death came, I said no. When divinity pulled, I remained. I chose the grave over the glory, and in choosing, I broke free from both. Sister Agatha screamed, pages flying from her text body like disturbed birds. She rejected the gift. She rejected the trap, Monteverde corrected. Every resurrection is forced, pulling souls back against their nature. But Mary chose to stay dead for 3 days, experiencing the full journey before returning on her own terms. She didn't break death. She completed it. The tomb began to collapse, not physically, but conceptually. Walls became suggestions, stone transformed into accumulated faith, architecture dissolved in the pure belief. I could see every church in the world simultaneously, all occupying the same space, overlapping like double-exposed photographs. In each church, resurrection was failing. Statues of Christ descended from crosses, wood and plaster attempting life but achieving only motion. Painted saints stepped from icons, two-dimensional beings trying to exist in 3 dimensions, tearing apart from the contradiction. Relics, fingers of saints, splinters of the true cross, vials of holy blood, began to regenerate, growing in the malformed approximations of their original owners. Write the solution, Monteverde commanded. Not the ending, the solution. My hand moved, flesh now indistinguishable from parchment. I am Cyprian Toretti, and I choose Mary's path. I reject resurrection not through denial but through acceptance. Death is not the enemy. Death is the period at the end of the sentence, without which all words become one endless, meaningless scream. The resurrected around me began to slow, their existence flickering. Tabitha's void face turned toward me, and in her absence, I saw peace. But the codex fought back, reading its own words through my dissolving fingers. Resurrection is the fundamental promise. Without it, faith collapses. Without it, suffering has no purpose. Without it, we are merely elaborate chemistry pretending at consciousness. That's the truth you're afraid of. I managed to write back. That we might just be chemistry. That consciousness might just be complexity. That death might just be ending. And that's okay. The pen fractured in my grip. Ink, blood, myrrh, something splattered across the final pages. In the splatter, words formed. Let the dead bury the dead. Christ's own words, finally understood. Not metaphor, but instruction. Not wisdom, but warning. Sister Agatha was unraveling, testimony by testimony. Each death and return she'd absorbed playing backward, undoing itself. The resurrected in the ossuaries began to settle, bones becoming merely bones again, prophecy returning to poetry. But Monteverde wasn't finished. He opened the second codex to its final page, blank except for a single line. The third day approaches. I realized with horror what he meant. Christ had risen on the third day. Humanity had now lived with resurrection for 2,000 years, 2 days in God's time, where a day is as 1,000 years. The third millennium, the third day, was upon us. Everyone, I whispered through paper lips. Everyone who ever lived. All at once. Monteverde smiled with perfect sorrow. Unless we break the mechanism first. Write the ending, Cyprian. Save us from salvation. Above us, Jerusalem's churches began to sing. Not the faithful, but the buildings themselves. Stone and mortar resonating with 2,000 years of accumulated praise. The third day was beginning. I write this 6 days later in a room that shouldn't exist. The codex consumed me entirely in that tomb. My body became paper. My blood became ink. My thoughts became testimony. But consumption isn't destruction. It's transformation. I exist now between pages, in margins, in the spaces between words where meaning lives but cannot be read. I did write the ending. Not the one Monteverde wanted, not the one Sister Agatha expected. I wrote the only ending possible. I am Cyprian Toretti, and I bear witness that resurrection and death are not opposites, but dance partners, each defining the other. To break resurrection would be to break death. To perfect death would be to perfect resurrection. The solution is not to choose one, but to maintain the balance, terrible as it is. The third day came as Monteverde predicted. At midnight, Jerusalem time, April 3rd, 2025, exactly 2,000 years after the traditional date of Christ's resurrection, every grave on earth opened. But they opened empty. The dead didn't rise. Instead, they dissolved in the testimony, each life becoming text in an infinite codex that now exists in quantum superposition, written and unwritten, read and unread simultaneously. 7 billion people woke that morning to find handwritten testimonies on their pillows, in their own hand, describing their own deaths. Future tense becoming past tense, becoming present continuous. My mother's testimony appeared on my childhood bed in Brescia. I am Teresa Toretti, and I die of joy when my son returns home. But I can never return home. I exist only here, in this space the Vatican designated as nowhere. A room removed from maps, from records, from memory itself. Monteverde visits daily, though he's different now. The Swiss Guard sergeant with gray eyes turned out to be Monteverde himself, younger, before he read the first codex. Time runs differently for those of us who've been texting. We exist at all points of our story simultaneously. The world continues, he tells me, but changed. Death is no longer permanent, but neither is life. People flicker between states. A woman in Tokyo died of cancer on Tuesday, attended her own funeral on Wednesday, returned to work Thursday. A child in Mumbai drowns each night and wakes each morning, carrying ocean in his lungs that never empties. The church is in ruins. Not physically, the buildings stand, but faith requires mystery, and mystery requires boundaries between known and unknown. When everyone holds their own death testimony, when resurrection becomes mundane, what need for salvation? Yesterday, if yesterday means anything, Peter visited me. Not a vision or ghost, but Peter himself, unstuck from time since his inverted crucifixion. He sat where I would sit if I had form, and wept. I should have let them kill him after Lazarus, he said. 3 resurrections were already too many. The fabric was already tearing. But I loved him. God help me. I loved him too much to see what he was becoming. He left me a gift, a nail from his own crucifixion, which I cannot hold, but which exists in my nowhere room. Sometimes it points toward Rome, sometimes toward Jerusalem, sometimes toward places that haven't been built yet. The Codex Vetitum still exists, infinite now, writing itself across every surface in every language. Anyone can read it. But reading it means adding your own testimony, your own death, your own return. The Vatican no longer hides it. There's no point. We've all become pages in it. I end this testimony where I began. My name is Father Cyprian Toretti, and by the time you read this, you'll have written your own ending. Check your pillow tonight. Your testimony is already there, waiting to be read. The third day never ended. We're all still rising.